Flight 372 of Atlantic Airlines was en route from New York to Puerto Rico. The Boeing 737, carrying 180 passengers, was cruising smoothly over the Atlantic Ocean. The captain, John Harris, glanced at the control tower and calmly reported, "This is Flight 372, altitude 35,000 feet. All systems normal." A voice from the tower responded, "Roger that, Flight 372. Continue as planned." Flight attendants were serving drinks, and the soft murmur of passengers chatting filled the cabin. The sky was perfectly clear, and everything seemed to be going according to schedule. But a few minutes later, John noticed something strange on the radar. A thick, dark cloud was rapidly approaching their path. He turned to his co-pilot, David, and said, "This isn't right." There were no weather forecasts for a storm in this area. Upon closer inspection, the speed at which the clouds were approaching was unbelievable. He quickly radioed back to the control tower. "Flight 372, we have unusual weather conditions ahead. We're approaching heavy cloud cover." There was no response from the tower. David glanced nervously at John. "Radio's dead?" John tried again. "Control tower, do you copy?" No answer. They were now entering a zone of thick, black clouds. The plane suddenly jolted. David grabbed the controls to stabilize the aircraft. Passengers clutched their armrests. Some looked out the windows in disbelief. Suddenly, the cabin lights flickered and went out. John issued an emergency command to the crew. "Everyone, take your seats and fasten your seatbelts." The clouds around the plane were strange, almost unnatural. John tried to steer the plane out of the cloud cover, but the controls weren't responding. Suddenly, they broke through the clouds into a clear, empty sky. For a moment, everything seemed calm, but the radar showed nothing. John realized that all the navigation systems had gone dark. The screens were black. All they had now was absolute silence. David, his voice trembling, said, "No signal. No GPS. No radar. Nothing." John whispered, "Where are we?" At that moment, a strange noise came from the wing of the plane, as if something had struck it. John glanced out the window and saw something he couldn't explain, a dark, blurry shape moving alongside the plane. David frantically tried to switch the plane to manual control, but they still weren't receiving any signals from the outside world. It was as if they had completely vanished off the map. One of the passengers screamed in panic, "It's the Bermuda Triangle. We've entered it." The mention of the Bermuda Triangle sent waves of fear throughout the cabin. But John and David knew they had to stay calm. Whatever this was, it was beyond old myths. They were facing a reality they could not comprehend. The plane suddenly went into free fall. The systems were still dead, and they had no control over the aircraft. Screams and cries erupted from the passengers. John fought desperately to regain control of the plane, but nothing could stop the descent. As they rapidly approached the ocean's surface, everything abruptly stopped. The plane was suspended in midair without shaking, without any movement. There was utter silence. David stared at the blank screens and asked, "What is this? What's happening?" At that moment, the systems came back to life. The plane gently stabilized, and the engines resumed their steady hum. They were back in the clear sky. John immediately tried contacting the control tower. "Control tower, this is Flight 372. We were in an emergency. Do you copy?" The control tower responded with a calm voice. "Flight 372, you disappeared for over 20 minutes. John stared at his watch in disbelief. Only a few minutes had passed. There was no explanation for what had happened. Everything appeared normal again, but in the hearts of John and David, a lingering sense of dread remained. The luxury cruise ship Ocean Breeze was sailing smoothly from Miami toward the Bahamas. The sky was clear, and the sun shimmered over the vast ocean. Passengers lounged on the deck, enjoying the warm sea breeze. Captain Robert Wallace gazed at the horizon, confident that this would be another routine voyage. In the control room, Sarah, the navigation officer, stared at the radar screen when suddenly a warning signal appeared. Hesitantly, she turned to the captain. "Something's not right. There's an object ahead of us, but it's not on any maps." Captain Wallace walked over to the display and took a closer look. "It could be a system glitch. Keep us on course, but stay alert." As the ship neared a region with dense, dark clouds, the air around them felt different. What had been a warm breeze now turned into a heavy, humid atmosphere. Robert picked up the radio and sent a message to the control tower. "This is Ocean Breeze. We're approaching a cloud formation. Can you hear us?" There was no response. Sarah glanced at him with worry. "Maybe we should turn back." Wallace shook his head and gave a firm order. "Run a systems check. Now!" The radar continued showing the unidentified object, but there was no sign of it in their direct view. The clouds grew thicker, enveloping the ship in an eerie quiet. Suddenly, a faint voice came through the ship's comms. "Captain, there's an issue with the engines. We're losing power." Wallace quickly took command. He ordered the engines to stop, but the ship kept moving forward as if being pulled by an invisible force. Passengers were starting to gather on the deck, sensing something was wrong. Sarah looked at her watch, confused. The hands of her watch were moving unusually slowly. She said in a low voice, "Captain, something's wrong with time. It's slowing down." Wallace checked the ship's main clock, and sure enough, the same issue was happening. He grabbed the intercom and announced, "All passengers return inside immediately. We're in an emergency situation." As they entered the heart of the dark clouds, the air became unnaturally heavy. There was something indescribable in the atmosphere, as if not only space but time itself was stretching. Every second felt like minutes. Sarah rushed to the captain, panic in her voice. "We're no longer in the real world. Time is warping here." Wallace looked around. The horizon had completely disappeared. There was no sign of land, sky, or even the ocean. Only thick, swirling mist surrounded them. The ship no longer responded to any of the captain's commands. He tried restarting the engines, but nothing worked. Everything was slowly falling into chaos. The crew was terrified, and passengers were growing increasingly confused. Robert, out of breath, returned to the control room. He frantically tried every means of communication, but there were no signals. Sarah, staring blankly at the captain, whispered, "We're trapped in some kind of time loop. Everything here is moving slower, but for us, it feels like days are passing." The passengers were losing all sense of time. Some claimed they hadn't eaten in hours, while others insisted they'd just had their last meal minutes ago. Tensions rose and arguments broke out. The collective anxiety was reaching its peak. Suddenly, one of the crew members shouted, "We have to jump. There's no way out." He frantically ran to the edge of the ship. Wallace and Sarah exchanged a desperate glance. The only question left was this the end? Then, without warning, the ship lurched forward violently and burst out of the clouds. The sky was clear again, and the sea was calm. Everything seemed back to normal, or so it appeared. Sarah checked her watch again, her face pale with shock. "Captain, we've been gone for over 48 hours. Wallace stared blankly at the horizon. But for us, it was just minutes. They would never understand what force had trapped them in that strange pocket of time and space. But when the ship finally docked, neither the crew nor the passengers were ever the same. The military submarine Orion was gliding silently through the deep waters of the North Atlantic. Their mission seemed straightforward: patrol near the infamous Bermuda Triangle and gather underwater data. But what they didn't anticipate was being pulled into the heart of an unknown phenomenon. Commander James Holloway stared at the display in front of him. The sonar system showed nothing unusual. Suddenly, an odd sound came from the sonar. David, the communications officer, said hesitantly, "Commander, we're picking up a strange sound from the depths. It's not like anything we've heard before." The air inside the submarine grew tense. Holloway ordered, "Hold position. Let's see where this is coming from." Several minutes passed, and the strange sound ceased. But something was off. A presence, a threat, lingered beneath them. David glanced at his watch, his face pale. "Commander, time's acting strange. The hands are moving too slowly." Holloway looked at the ship's main clock, and sure enough, it was as if time itself was slowing down. Suddenly, red warning lights began flashing. The sonar flared up again, but this time, what it revealed was beyond belief. Massive shapes were moving around the submarine, creatures that shouldn't exist at such depths or anywhere in this world. Sarah, sitting at the sonar station, whispered in fear, These aren't normal sea creatures. They're far too large." The submarine shook violently. Holloway shouted, "Everyone, back to your stations." The vessel was being pulled downward, as though some unseen force was dragging it into the abyss. David's eyes were fixed on the sonar. Whatever was approaching was enormous and unidentifiable, something far beyond any known life form. Now, everyone aboard the submarine realized they had crossed into a dangerous, unknown realm. Holloway exhaled sharply. "This is neither a natural phenomenon nor a creature we can comprehend. Something far greater than us is out there." The submarine came to an abrupt halt. Everything grew eerily quiet. Holloway gave a calm but firm command. "Full blackout. We need to move carefully from here." But the silence didn't last long. The walls of the submarine began to shake under heavy blows. Enormous, unknown creatures were moving outside, circling them like predators. No one could see them, but their presence was undeniable. Sarah, her voice trembling, said, "We can't stay here any longer. We need to get out." But time, in that moment, had lost all meaning. Each second felt like an eternity, and the creatures were closing in. The sonar displayed that they were completely surrounded. David suddenly yelled, "Commander, one of the creatures is coming right at us. Fast!" Holloway made a quick decision. "Shut everything down and stay still. It's our only chance." For a moment, there was no sound except for the beating hearts of the crew. The submarine floated in the deep, endless darkness of the ocean, with no hope of escape. The silence was suffocating. But then, a horrific sound of metal tearing filled the submarine. The walls caved in, and water began to rush inside. Sarah screamed, "We're sinking." Everything spiraled out of control. The submarine plunged deeper into the abyss, and time itself seemed to accelerate. The last thing the crew heard was the terrifying roar of the creatures, an otherworldly sound that would forever echo in their minds. They never resurfaced. The submarine Orion became yet another of the countless mysteries lost in the Bermuda Triangle. The research ship, Aquila, cruised silently through the calm waters of the North Atlantic, heading toward the most feared area for sailors, the Bermuda Triangle. Their mission was clear: gather data on magnetic anomalies and study this mysterious region. Commander Oliver stood on the bridge, staring out at the horizon. Everything seemed normal, but a thick fog was forming in the distance. Maria, the radar and sonar operator, called out, "Commander, we've got dense fog rolling in fast. This isn't supposed to happen here." Oliver nodded calmly. "Slow down. We don't want to miss anything." The ship slowed down, and the crew prepared for the unexpected. As the fog closed in, something strange caught their eye. A wrecked, old aircraft was floating on the water's surface, one that seemed to have crashed decades ago. John, one of the researchers, whispered in shock, That's a bomber from World War II." As they moved closer, the wreck became clearer. But this was just the beginning. Sarah, another crew member, peered into the depths and gasped. Look down their sunken ships. Below the surface, they saw rusted hulls of ships, frozen in time. Warships, cargo vessels, even fishing boats, all lying still in a silent graveyard beneath the sea. Oliver gave a quiet order. "Hold position. This is a graveyard, but they shouldn't be here." The fog thickened by the second, and visibility became almost impossible. The atmosphere on board grew heavier as a sense of dread settled over them. Maria spoke in a trembling voice. "Commander, the radar isn't showing anything. It's like we're not even here." Suddenly, a strange sound came from the deep, a sound that didn't belong to any creature they knew. John rushed to the commander, panic creeping into his voice. "We need to leave now. This place, it's not just dangerous, it's a death trap." Oliver made his decision. "Full speed ahead. We're getting out of here." The engines roared to life as the ship powered forward, but the fog only grew denser, more suffocating with every passing moment. Then, one by one, everything around them started to disappear. Planes, sunken ships, all vanishing into thin air as if they had never existed. Sarah spoke in a shaky whisper. "Where did everything go? They were right here." But the real horror was yet to come. As they finally broke through the fog, Maria looked at the ship's systems, her face drained of color. "Commander, we've got a bigger problem." Oliver, his heart pounding, asked, "What is it?" Maria pointed to the ship's digital calendar. "We've been out here for months." Everyone stared in disbelief. Time had passed, stolen by the Bermuda Triangle, while they thought only days had gone by. Oliver exhaled slowly, almost in denial. "That's impossible. There must be some mistake." But there was no mistake. When they finally reached the port, the world they returned to had changed. They had been declared lost, believed to have vanished like so many others before them. The Aquila had not only lost valuable data, but its crew was broken, haunted by the knowledge that the Bermuda Triangle didn't just trap physical objects. It consumed time itself. And everything within its fog, everything they had witnessed, was now forever buried in the forgotten mist.